Hello, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us here on the Dorks Talk Sports podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jeremy, and joining me is once again a man who needs no introduction, Jay Smooth.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Remember, you can listen to us here on SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Podcasts.
As usual, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
On this episode, we will be taking a look at the NFC North, and we might as well start off with the team that took us by surprise last season, the team that won the division, the Chicago Bears. Had a bit of a tumultuous offseason. What's a move or two that you liked from them, Jay Smooth?
I really liked their draft. They lost a couple of key guys on the defense. They did pick up a corner and a safety to try and replace them. But yeah, my favorite move was their draft pick, running back David Montgomery.
Yeah, I like that pick. They lost Jordan Howard as well. It was a good pick to get that David Montgomery to try to replace him. They still have Tariq Cohen there. I did like them bringing in Chuck Pagano because they lost Vic Fangio, who became the head coach at Denver in this offseason.
Well-deserved.
Well-deserved indeed. He's a really good coach, but I think it's going to hurt them a little bit this season. They still have a good defense, so I don't think they're going to drop off too far. They still have Khalil Mack, who is a big-time game changer, but they did lose a couple key guys in the defensive backfield, safety Adrian Amos and cornerback Bryce Callahan. I think those are going to be two big losses for them. But like I said, they still have Khalil Mack on defense. Matt Nagy's a good head coach, and I really like Mitchell Trubisky, quarterback there. I think he's developing into a really good quarterback in the NFL. So while they did lose a bunch of key guys, I don't think they're going to have a significant drop-off from the 12-win season they had last year. I actually have them winning the division again this year at 11 wins. How do you see their season playing out, Jay Smooth?
I agree with most of what you're saying. I think they lost a little bit more than they gained this offseason. I have them winning 10 games as of now. I think they are going to drop off just a little bit, but they're still going to be pretty competitive.
Yeah, it's hard to always get back to double-digit 12-win season, kind of like they had last season. But I do still think they're a really good team, and they're going to be competitive. I don't think there's any question about that. So then next up, we can take a look at the Green Bay Packers. Last year was a bit of a rough year for them, going 6-9-1. They had all the issues there between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy, but now Mike McCarthy's gone. They brought in another kind of wonderkind, Matt LeFleur, former offensive coordinator in Tennessee, a guy that's also worked under Sean McVay. He's taken over the reins there in Green Bay, kind of revitalized that offense there. But what's one of their moves that you like this season?
I really like what they did on the defensive side of the ball. They did lose Clay Matthews. It's going to be weird not seeing him out there this year in the Green Bay uniform. They brought in a couple of guys to replace him on the edge there. Zadarius Smith from Baltimore, I believe, and Preston Smith as well. Those guys are really going to help the pass rush, and they did snag Adrian Amos, aforementioned, from the Bears, so I think that's going to be huge as well.
Yeah, I'm really big on Green Bay this year, mainly because all the moves they've made defensively, like you said, grabbing Adrian Amos, bringing in Zadarius and Preston Smith. They also have a couple good rookies that they're bringing in, Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage. So I think they really revamped the defense, which is only going to benefit Aaron Rodgers in that offense so much more. Feeling a big year coming out of Aaron Rodgers this season. I think with McCarthy gone, the kind of offensive firepower that LeFleur wants to bring, the offensive kind of scheme he wants to bring, I think it's really going to benefit Aaron Rodgers. I really think they're going to have a bounce-back season this year. I actually have them winning 10 games and winning one of the wild card spots this season. Where do you have them?
I have them right about where you do, at 9 or 10 wins. I think they're going to have a bounce back here as well. I think the other Aaron on that offense, Aaron Jones, is going to have a big year. And they did lose Randall Cobb there in the slot, but they got a bunch of young receivers who more than capable of stepping up. So this is definitely the year Rodgers either cements himself as a top-notch quarterback or doesn't, because he does not have McCarthy to blame anymore.
Right, yeah. I think he's been kind of revitalized now that McCarthy's gone. I think they got into a funk there with him. I don't think they've won as much as Green Bay fans would have hoped to have won so far. They won the one Super Bowl. Man, it was 7 or 8 years ago now. Yeah, I really like Aaron Jones. I think he's going to have a big season this year, and they're going to need him to, because they have Devontae Adams, who exploded last year onto the scene, and we all know the kind of offensive player Aaron Rodgers is. So if Aaron Jones has a big year, it's only going to benefit them that much more. The next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota won 8 games last year, finished second in the division behind Chicago after making it to the NFC title game a few years ago. They made a couple weird moves last offseason. What's a a move or two they've made this year that you like so far?
My favorite move was actually not a move at all. They held on to linebacker Anthony Barr, which I thought was really
Good player.
big. I did not think they would be able to pull that off, but they did. They did lose running back Latavius Murray, who was a big help for them in past years, but as long as Dalvin Cook can stay healthy, I don't think they'll miss him all that much.
Keeping Anthony Barr was one of the few guys they actually kept on defense. They lost a lot there. Sheldon Richardson, Andrew Sendejo, George Iloka, Marcus Sherrills, and then they lost Nick Eaton on the offensive line as well. They lost a bunch from what I can tell. They did bring in Gary Kubiak to help out with the coaching staff, which is a good move. Drafted Garrett Bradbury at center to try to replace losing Nick Eaton. But for the most part, they didn't really do much this offseason, and I think part of that issue comes from the amount of money that they gave Kirk Cousins last offseason. What was it, 3 years, $84 million? All of it guaranteed. So when you spend that much money on a quarterback, you're going to kind of handcuff yourself from the other moves you can make. And I think we're seeing that starting this offseason where they weren't able to do much to assist. And they do have a good offense there. Dalvin Cook, Stefon Diggs, and Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph at tight end. So they have a lot of weapons. But the issue was they couldn't protect Kirk Cousins hardly at all last season, and they didn't really do anything to change that this offseason. So I feel like it's going to be a pretty long year once again in Minnesota. I have them at about 7 wins this season. I just don't really see much. And if their defense can bounce back to where they were 2 years ago, I think they'll have a good shot at making this a competitive 3-team race in the NFC North. But I just don't see much out of them this season. How do you view the Vikings this year, Jay Smooth?
I'm going to fight you on this one. I actually have the Vikings going 11-5 and taking this competitive division. I agree with you. Kirk Cousins has he's been good the past few years. He always kind of fades away in like clutch moments, it seems. I'm going to say he turns it around this year. Yeah, they have, like you said, they have two stud receivers in Diggs and Thielen. They got Kyle Rudolph, and they drafted a tight end, Irv Smith Jr., who's similar to Kyle Rudolph. He's a playmaker as well. And as long as Dalvin Cook stays healthy, I think that offense is going to be pretty explosive this year. On defense, losing Andrew Sendejo, the safety, I think is going to be the biggest impact. But they still have Harrison Smith and the shutdown corner Xavier Rhodes. So I think the defense is going to be just fine. I have them winning this division very narrowly, but I have them at 11 wins.
Well, we definitely have opposing views of the Minnesota Vikings this season. I just feel like the losses on defense are going to be too hard for them to overcome, and just not a fan of Kirk Cousins. I mean, he's a good player. There's no doubt about that. He definitely puts up the numbers, but I just don't think he's clutch enough to win the big games when it matters. But we'll see it this year. If he does breakout season like you're thinking he does, they could very easily, well, I won't say very easily, but I could see them winning the division. I just don't think it's right there now for them.
Very understandable. They did lose a lot on defense, but I think they held on to the right guys. So I think that Cousins is also going to bounce back. Like you said, he has not been clutch in the big moments in the past, but I think he pulls it together this year and shows why they paid him all that guaranteed money.
Yep, well, it'll be interesting to see which one of us is more to the point. The bottom of this division, we have Detroit, the Lions. They had a 6-10 season last year in Matt Patricia's first season as head coach. They seem to have been perpetually right around the 7-9 wins each season. Kind of fell back last year with a 6-win season. I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of Detroit this year. I don't think they didn't have a good team last year, and I don't know if they did enough this season to overcome the type of team they were last year to compete with the three other teams in this division. What's one move that you like so far from them?
I like the addition of Trey Flowers, edge rusher, and slot receiver Davey Amendola as well. I thought they definitely mismanaged their draft and went after some high talented guys, but they didn't really feel the needs that they have. They grabbed the most talented tight end in the draft, which I don't know, some people are comparing him to Gronkowski already, which is it's a little bit early for that, but yeah, I don't like their offseason moves that much, and I have them bring him out the rear of this division for sure.
Yeah, I think Matt Patricia's a good coach. I don't know how good of a head coach he is. Trey Flowers, I do like that pickup. I think he's an upgrade over Ezekiel Ansah, who they lost in the offseason. They brought in a cornerback, Justin Coleman, as well. Really like that move. I think he's a really good player. He's going to help out on defense. But other than that, I just don't see much for this team to like at this point. Getting TJ Hawkinson, I think he either 8th or 9th overall. He's a good, talented tight end, but when you got a top 10 pick, I don't think you can use that on a tight end. I think if you're in that position to where you're drafting top 10, you need to spend your draft picks wisely on more important positions. I mean, if he does turn out to be Gronkowski, obviously that's a huge pick, but I feel like they may have had a shot at him at the early of the second round. They could have filled some of their voids on defense or on offense with that pick. Really not a fan of the draft, especially their first overall pick, and they didn't really make up for it with any of their later picks. So just not a good offseason in my mind. There's not much to like about them at this point. They do have a couple good receivers. Marvin Jones Jr., Kenny Golladay is a really good young receiver. But then at running back, who do they have?
I believe it's Kerryon Johnson as of now. They lost Theo Riddick, who was a big part of their passing game. Both their lines is where they needed to bring in some help, and they just didn't do much there at all.
Yeah, winning teams start on both lines, on the offense and the defense, and like you said, I don't think they did much on either side of the ball. We know Matthew Stafford likes to go back and sling it around. I don't think he's going to have much time this year to do that. And then defensively, I do like the Trey Flowers pickup. He's an upgrade, but other than that, I don't think they have anybody else to complement him to really provide any type of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And I'm just not a big fan of their schedule either. I think they have a really tough schedule. They do have an early bye week as well. They start out at Arizona, which they should win, but then they follow up with games against the Chargers, Eagles, and then the Chiefs. And then after their bye, they have games with Green Bay and Minnesota. So they have a tough start to the schedule, and I just don't see them overcoming a bad start. I have a long season for them. I see them winning maybe 4 games this year. What do you see there, Jay Smooth?
I have them 4 or 5. All depends on how they gel together. They can definitely put up points, but I think they're just a little bit too one-dimensional on offense. Don't really have much of a running game. They're expecting big things out of Kerryon Johnson this year, so I could be wrong, but I just don't see them doing much better than they have in past years. And defensively, I think Patricia has definitely helped on that side of the ball, and they're definitely improving, but they're just not quite there. Like you said, they did bring in Trey Flowers, but they lost Ansa, so they kind of replaced what they lost. And outside of him, they don't really have too much on that D-line, and they do have a really good quarterback in Darius Slay, I believe, but
he's real good.
Outside of him, I don't think their secondary is that impressive either.
No, Kerryon Johnson's definitely a good young running back. Outside of him, they don't have much depth there at running back, which I think is going to hurt him in the long run. I think they brought in C.J. Anderson, I believe.
Yes, they did.
But which C.J. Anderson are we going to see? Last year, kind of tale of 2 seasons. When he was in Carolina, he didn't really do much. Then I believe he got cut and picked up by the Rams. And then once Gurley got hurt, Anderson definitely picked it up and had some pretty big games for them late in the season. But it'll be interesting to see which C.J. Anderson shows up in Detroit to complement Kerryon Johnson. Darius Slay is a really good cornerback. I'm a big fan of his. And I think Patricia's going to get this team going in the right direction. I just feel like this year's draft was a good chance for them to kind of get things going. I think they fumbled their draft, and it's going to take them another season to kind of rebound from that. So I got Chicago winning the division this year. Sounds like you have Minnesota taking it.
That is correct. I think this could seriously be a 3 teams making the playoffs type of case here.
Yeah, I do have Green Bay as well and making the playoffs as a wild card, and I think Minnesota has the potential to make this a 3-team race. I'm just not high on them. They didn't make up for their losses on defense, in my opinion, and I don't trust Kirk Cousins to lead them.
Captain Kirk, baby.
We will see, though. All right, let's move on to the players portion of our podcast here. Start with overrated player. Who's your overrated player in this division?
I hate to pick on the Lions so much, but I'm going to go with quarterback Matt Stafford. Never been a huge fan of his. I just think, kind of like we talked about Kirk Cousins, I feel like Matt Stafford has had some decent teams, but he's not clutch, and he puts up big fantasy numbers, but outside of that, I don't think he's a good real-life quarterback.
Yeah, I can see the argument for that because I feel the same way for my overrated player, which is Kirk Cousins. He put up good offensive numbers in Washington, and he put up good numbers last year for the Vikings, but, he's never been able to really win the big games. I think he has a losing record against teams with winning records, which is kind of an indicator that, he doesn't step up when he needs to, and it seems like a lot of his yardage and touchdowns, he's a garbage time quarterback. Whether it's late in games when they're winning or losing, he seems to pick it up in games that are blowouts. So I'm not a fan of him as a franchise quarterback, and definitely not a fan of him getting a contract of guaranteed $84 million. I don't think he did anything to deserve it. But I think this team they have this season is definitely talented enough to kind of break out. It'll depend, I think, heavily on Kirk Cousins.
Understandable. That's a sneaky stat you pulled there. I like that.
That's what I'm here for. But let's move on now to underrated players. For me, my underrated player is the new edge rusher on the Detroit Lions, Mr. Trey Flowers. He spent the last few seasons in New England, so I think people kind of underestimated how good he was simply because everybody seems to be good on New England because they're always winning and they're always making runs late in the season. But I think he's definitely an upgrade over Ansah, who they lost, and I think he's going to have a big impact for them. But like I said before, they don't have much to complement him with up front in the front seven. So I think he's going to be a one-man wrecking crew this season. Unfortunately, without the help, he's not going to be able to do as much as he's able to. But I think he's definitely going to show us how good he is. Who's your underrated player, Jason?
I like that pick there, Jeremy. I have Aaron Jones, running back of the Green Bay Packers, as my underrated player. I think he has clearly been the best running back on that team for quite some time, and I think the new head coach, Matt LeFleur, might finally realize that, and he's going to get unleashed this year. As with other running backs in the past, he does have some minor injury history, but if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to have a monster year and help those Packers get back in it.
Yeah, I think Jones has definitely been handicapped the last few years, not only due to some injuries, but also because McCarthy didn't really seem to know what he wanted to do with a running back. You know, he was playing a lot of running back by committee kind of going on there in Green Bay. So definitely think he's going to benefit from LeFleur coming in and Rodgers having a bounce back season. All right, how about breakout player this season for the NFC North?
I'm going to go with rookie running back David Montgomery from the Bears. He's got a little bit of competition there, but Tariq Cohen mainly a change of pace guy, so I don't think it'll be long before we see him unleashed as a workhorse type running back. I think he has all the tools, and it's going to be tough replacing Jordan Howard, but I think he's more than capable, and he is going to show us why the Bears drafted him so highly.
Yeah, they moved up to get Montgomery because he seemed to be the guy that they wanted, especially after they had lost Jordan Howard, and if he's able to step into a significant role for them, the Bears can only benefit from him. My breakout guy is going to be Dalvin Cook. His rookie season was cut short with an injury. He had a pretty good bounce back season last year, but now Latavius Murray's gone. I think the offense is going to be shouldered onto him, and I think he's going to be able to carry it. He's got the talent, he's got the skill. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to help carry the Minnesota offense.
I agree there. I think he was a monster last year before he went down there.
Yeah.
He was having some big games for sure.
Yeah, he's a really good running back. Health concerns have always been an issue for him, but if he can get that under control, I think we're going to see a really good season out of him this season. All right, well, that kind of wraps up this episode of our podcast this year. What's your final parting thought on the North?
I think this is the division that will be the most competitive this year out of all 8. I have 3 teams with double-digit wins. I have the Lions kind of just getting beat up on there at the bottom.
Understandable. Yeah, I mean, if you got 3 teams making the playoffs there, one team's going to suffer. And yeah, for my final thought, I think this is still Chicago's division this season, but I see the Green Bay Packers really bouncing back this season, specifically Aaron Rodgers. I think we're going to see an MVP-type season out of him. Going to help carry Packers back to the playoffs. May it be as a wild card or a division winner, but I think he's going to get them back, and I think they're going to go on a bit of a run there. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Dorks Talk Sports podcast. Remember, you can listen to us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Podcasts.
As always, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right, who should we go over next there, Jay Smooth?
I'd say we give the AFC West a rundown.
That's a good division. It'll be super competitive there. All right, join us next time as we take a look at the AFC West.
Bye for now.
See you soon.